In the embrace of the biting cold, to the accompaniment of a howling wind that whispered ancient tales to the snow-capped peaks, a fateful encounter unfolded. A young Viking named Leif, guided by an unknown force, stumbled upon an artifact destined to change his life. Hidden deep within a cave that once served as a refuge for an ancient shaman, the artifact held a secret plucked from the oblivion of history. Leif, unknowingly, was the heir to a lost kingdom, an empire that had vanished into the icy abyss of the far north. From a young age, Leif had felt a vague unease, a premonition that fate had something greater in store for him than the lot of a mere mortal. Yet he could never have imagined that the burden of a forgotten lineage rested upon his shoulders. The ancient parchment he discovered alongside the artifact revealed a map. Not an ordinary map, but a guide to lands shrouded in myth, etched with runes that told of a kingdom exiled by betrayal and eternal ice. Every line on this map seemed to whisper secrets, awaiting their hour to be unveiled, a struggle ignited in Leif's heart, torn between his duty to his village and the call of his blood. He felt the stirrings of a journey that would test not only his warrior prowess, but also his leadership qualities. But this map had not appeared by chance. Behind every revealed secret lay new questions, and every answer came at a price. Leif was no ordinary youth. From birth, it seemed, he bore the mark of something greater, though he was unaware of it. He was born in a small village, nestled among majestic fjords and impenetrable forests, where life was as harsh and unforgiving as the northern winter. His father, Sten, was a respected fisherman, and his mother, Estrid, a weaver whose stories were so vivid and captivating they seemed to come alive. Leif's childhood was steeped in these stories. Estrid spoke of kingdoms far to the north, beyond lands where no human foot had ever trod, tales that stirred the boy's imagination as he helped his father pull nets from the icy water or learn to wield a wooden sword. As he grew, Leif proved to be more than just a fisherman's son. His restless spirit and thirst for knowledge drew him beyond the safe confines of the village. By the age of 12, he hunted in the forests alone, bringing home furs and meat for his family and neighbors. At 16, he participated in his first sea expedition with other village warriors, repelling marauders who tried to seize their boats. It was then that he began to ponder the world beyond his homeland. Why settle for a small, confined life when a vast, unexplored world stretched beyond the mountains and seas? Yet fate seemed determined to keep him in his accustomed routine. The encounter with the artifact happened on an ordinary day, but Leif's life up to that point had been anything but mundane. He was always drawn to the ice-covered mountains where few dared to venture. After years of tales about a shaman who lived in a forgotten cave, he decided it was time to explore it. His curiosity led him forward, as if an unknown voice called his name. Armed only with his courage, a torch, and a small axe, Leif found the cave, and within it, the artifact destined to change everything. The map, the scroll, and the echo of his mother's stories were no longer mere legends. They became reality. That day, the sky was overcast with gray clouds, and the wind howled between the mountain peaks, as if foretelling something great. Leif left his home early in the morning, taking only his hunting axe, a bag of provisions, and a torch to light his way. He was searching for rare deadwood that grew high in the mountains, used for crafting the strongest bows. However, this day was different from all others. As he reached the rocky slopes, a raven landed before him, gazing with an almost supernatural stare, then soared skyward and flew towards the cliff's summit. It was then that Leif realized he was looking for more than just deadwood. An inexplicable urge overcame him, a quiet voice within his head persistently urging him to go further. The path to the cave was not easy. The slopes were covered in treacherous ice, and every step was a test of courage. Leif discovered ancient tracks, almost erased by time, signs that someone or something had passed this way before. He cautiously followed them, feeling as though he was crossing a boundary, separating the ordinary world from the unknown. Along the way, he stumbled on a loose rock and fell to his knees, but as he rose, he saw something remarkable. The cave entrance, a dark crevice surrounded by runes carved into the ice, symbols he did not recognize, yet which seemed to pulse with their own energy. Upon entering the cave, Leif felt the temperature drop sharply, but the air was filled with something else, a mixture of mystery and awe. The torchlight illuminated walls covered with ancient engravings. In the center of the cave, on a crude stone pedestal, lay the artifact. It was a map, made of a material that glowed faintly, as if possessing a life of its own. Beside it lay a rolled parchment, sealed with red wax bearing the symbol of a kingdom Leif had never seen before. As he touched the artifact, he felt a wave of warmth course through his hands, as if all his mother's stories had come alive in that moment. From that point on, the world would never be the same. The artifact that came into Leif's hands was strikingly different from anything he had ever seen. The object resembled a map, yet its surface was astonishingly unusual, seeming almost alive, with lines shimmering like rivers of molten gold. The material from which the map was crafted exuded coolness, but simultaneously evoked a strange warmth in his chest, as if awakening something hidden within. Before Leif's eyes, the lines on the map's surface shifted their positions, forming new paths, as if responding to the slightest change in the artifact's orientation. This was not merely a navigational tool, but a true guide, perhaps even a challenge of fate, as if the map awaited someone worthy to unlock its secrets. Leif could not comprehend the meaning of what he saw, but he felt an inseparable connection between the artifact and his own origins. Alongside the map lay a sealed parchment, cloaked in even greater mystery. Leif carefully broke the seal, and the sound of cracking wax echoed through the silent cave. Inside the scroll, writings in an ancient language were barely legible, but individual words seared themselves into his memory as if branded by fire: Heir, Lost Kingdom, Northern Watch. The text hinted at a throne seized by force and a perilous path to be undertaken to reclaim a rightful heritage. The parchment mentioned a relic accessible only to the true heir, a key to uniting the scattered pieces of the mystery. In that instant, an inexplicable change occurred within Leif's soul. The world he knew expanded its boundaries, reaching beyond the forests and mountains that had been his home. He felt the weight of responsibility placed upon his shoulders, but also a surge of unknown power. An insatiable curiosity ignited in his chest. Who were the kings mentioned in the scroll? What secrets did the Lost Kingdom hold? And, most importantly, why was Leif himself at the very center of these events? Driven by a thirst for knowledge, he realized the necessity of leaving the comfort of his home village and embarking on the path indicated by the parchment. Something grand awaited him, though he could barely imagine the scale of the trials ahead. Upon returning to the village, Leif was restless. The map and parchment consumed his thoughts as if every etched line pulsed with energy, beckoning him into the unknown. He understood that he had to prepare, both physically and spiritually, for the trials to come. Leif headed to the forge of Eric, the local blacksmith and an old family friend. "Where are you off to, boy? That old sword won't last long on a journey," Eric remarked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. Leif merely smiled in response, trying to hide his excitement. He asked Eric to strengthen his sword and forge a small dagger for unforeseen circumstances. Meanwhile, he gathered the necessary provisions at the village market: dried bread, salted meat, a wool blanket to keep warm on cold nights, and a small pouch of healing herbs gifted to him by Sigrid, the local healer. As he prepared his horse for departure, Leif felt the symbolic weight of the impending separation. To leave the village meant not just to depart from home, but to renounce his accustomed life in pursuit of a higher purpose. Before setting out, he visited the hill where his parents rested. Taking a deep breath, he whispered, "If this is truly my destiny, may the gods guide my way." Having gathered everything he needed, Leif mounted his horse and rode into the unknown, carefully tucking the parchment into his pack. Several days of travel proved difficult, and the harsh northern expanses began to reveal their unforgiving nature. Nights were cold, days were lonely, and the winds seemed to whisper warnings. One night, as Leif made camp at the edge of a forest, something unusual happened. The parchment began to emit a golden glow, so bright it seemed like a beacon in the darkness. Leif took it from his pack, his hand trembling with astonishment. The previously static writings on the parchment now glowed and moved, forming a path leading deeper into the forest. He understood it was a sign, a clear indication, and without hesitation, he followed it. Led by the light, Leif navigated through a tangle of trees and roots, which seemed to try and hold him back. After several hours, he reached a clearing where the glow ceased, revealing a moss-covered stone pedestal. Upon it lay an unusual object, a golden compass, crafted with such skill that it seemed a divine creation. When Leif took it in his hands, the compass glowed faintly, and its needle spun wildly before coming to rest, pointing north. This compass was extraordinary, as if alive. It pulsed with the same energy as the map and parchment. Leif understood that this relic held the key to unlocking the path to the lost kingdom. Leif set out alone, carrying only hope and the golden compass, a small relic that seemed to possess a life of its own. The first weeks of the journey were difficult, as he had anticipated. The north was not kind to travelers, and the wilderness seemed to stretch endlessly before him, but the compass never failed him. Its golden needle always pointed steadily north, as if it had a mind of its own, as if fate itself were guiding his way. In the early days of his journey, Leif was filled with awe at the impeccable accuracy of his compass. Wherever the young man went, this navigational instrument pointed his way with unwavering certainty. With each step he overcame, the symphony of icy winds sweeping across the endless expanses, the majestic silhouettes of distant mountains, and the ceaseless roar of swift rivers seemed only to confirm that he had embarked on a path of great accomplishments. His resolve grew stronger day by day, yet the oppressive burden of loneliness increasingly made him doubt his own readiness for the trials fate had in store for him. At times, he was tormented by thoughts of whether he was pursuing merely a chimera, a phantom illusion drawing him into a non-existent reality. But then, his father's teachings, the greatness of his lineage, and the memories of legendary heroes of bygone eras who had dared similar journeys would resurface in his mind. This compass could not lie, he told himself. As time passed and days turned into weeks, the surrounding nature began to undergo tangible metamorphoses. The climate grew increasingly harsh, the winds became fiercely piercing, and dense, ancient forests gradually gave way to parched, lifeless, barren lands. Leif could not definitively determine his current location, but the compass remained his faithful guide, unfailingly pointing the correct direction. He traversed deep, winding valleys, climbed snow-capped mountain peaks, and descended into seemingly endless ravines. But each step forward brought him closer to a goal he could not yet fully comprehend. One night, after several days of incessant storms, Leif felt utterly exhausted. His face was etched with deep lines of fatigue, and his body felt heavy as lead, as if he carried insurmountable mountains. He made his humble camp in a small, secluded clearing not far from a frozen stream. However, Before surrendering to much-desired sleep, he decided to look at his golden compass one last time. And at that moment, something truly strange happened. The golden light emanating from it seemed to grow brighter and more intense, and the needle stopped, as if it had discovered something important. Leif did not have time to fully comprehend what was happening before a deep, peaceful sleep overcame him. The next morning, the sun barely pierced through the dense shroud of clouds, as if hiding from something. Nevertheless, Leif felt an irresistible sense of urgency, an unseen force compelling him to move forward. The compass remained motionless, pointing in the same direction, and as he cast his gaze forward, the young man noticed something unusual on the horizon. The trees grew sparser, the ground became flatter, and the wind died down as if a magical presence had settled over this region. Everything around him seemed different, transformed. He felt his heart beat faster, foretelling an imminent discovery. The lost kingdom was very close. He felt its approach with every cell of his body. In the following weeks, Leif was as if guided by this strange sense of proximity, as if an invisible force pulled him forward. The vegetation gradually gave way to an increasingly arid environment, and the mountains, which had previously seemed insurmountable, were now within sight. However, the most unusual thing was the silence that enveloped this land. No longer were the natural sounds that usually accompanied him on his journey to be heard. No birdsong, no murmuring of running water. The landscape, despite its grandeur, seemed lifeless, as if everything here was merely a reflection of long-past times. Finally, after several days of absolute silence and with the compass pointing to a massive rock formation, Leif saw something that made him stop abruptly. Right before him stood a gigantic opening in the mountain, like gates created by nature itself. The sound of the wind seemed to have completely vanished, and absolute silence reigned. He slowly approached the entrance, feeling a strange, almost palpable energy in the air. This place exuded an aura of mystery, as if it were a portal to a world that existed only in legends. Leif stepped into the passage, and as he delved deeper into the dark cave, the golden compass began to glow again, illuminating the path before him. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the rocky walls, and he could not shake the feeling of something grand, something that was here for a specific purpose. He passed through narrow corridors, climbed slippery steps, and crossed rickety bridges, but the compass never failed him. The feeling that he was close to unraveling a great mystery grew stronger and stronger. But despite all the magnificence of this place, Leif found no signs of life here. There were no inhabitants, no traces of any structures. Everything was desolate and eerily quiet. As he advanced further and further, the space around him seemed to expand until he entered a massive chamber, illuminated by the golden light emanating from his artifact. The room was truly gigantic, with stone columns adorned with intricate patterns and symbols he could not comprehend. It felt as if he were inside an ancient temple, where the echo of the past still lingered in the air, awaiting its hour. The wind, which had seemed to vanish earlier, returned, but now it felt like a distant, gentle breeze, as if the earth itself breathed with him, and then he suddenly stopped. He stood in the center of the room, gazing into the emptiness that stretched before him. Nothing remained but deep silence and the golden light that surrounded him. But he knew this was only the beginning. The lost kingdom, with its stories and secrets preserved for generations, lay directly before him. Leif did not yet know what awaited him, but the journey that had brought him here was merely a prelude to something much grander, and standing there, surveying the expanse of this place, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, as if he were the very key destined to unlock a mystery that had endured for centuries. Filled with anxiety and doubt, Leif stepped into the confines of the abandoned kingdom. Majestic and mysterious, it breathed with antiquity, as if history itself enveloped its stone walls. This place bore the name Jonvik, which in the language of his ancestors meant Iron Bay. And this name perfectly matched what he saw. Sturdy buildings and wrought iron monuments greeted the traveler at the city gates. Iron was everywhere, from ornately decorated doors to massive support pillars, from shields covered with forgotten symbols to rusted chains hanging from the towers. Jonvik's streets were submerged in a thick layer of moss, as if the very earth had absorbed the passage of time. Houses, solidly built of dark wood, lined the roads but seemed frozen in silence, as if their inhabitants had suddenly vanished. Every structure exuded grandeur and desolation, and the silence that reigned here was truly ominous. No laughter, no children's voices, not even the sounds of animals, only the echo of Leif's footsteps and the quiet rustle of the wind sweeping through the narrow streets. Despite the apparent desolation, Leif sensed an unseen presence. Something in the air itself suggested that life lurked beneath the veil of silence. But this life was hidden, as if everyone feared the Vikings' intrusion. Leif felt a tension, as if he were constantly being watched. The windows of the houses were tightly closed, but through gaps in the curtains, shadows sometimes flickered, casting weary glances at him. This feeling of being watched became unbearable. He began to notice that the few glances he managed to catch were filled with animosity and fear, as if his very presence here was a threat. Dark images formed in Leif's mind of what could have happened in this place to make its inhabitants, if they could still be called that, so terrified. Soon, Leif realized that the inhabitants of Jonvik saw him not as a hero or a welcome guest, but as an enemy. Every step he took was accompanied by muffled whispers and hostile gestures. Some watched him from afar, while others crept in the shadows, hiding behind doors and walls. The tension in the air was almost palpable, as if an invisible threat loomed over him. Leif, with his heightened instincts, felt a growing unease, but something within him compelled him to move forward. He had to understand what had happened here, why the people of Jonvik were so scared, and why he, a descendant of this kingdom, was perceived as an enemy. The answers to the mysteries of this place and his true purpose had to be revealed, but Leif knew he would have to act with extreme caution. Leif continued his journey through the deserted streets of Jonvik, feeling the weight of the silence and the animosity from its inhabitants. The further he went, the more mystery enveloped him, and although the city seemed almost deserted, something drew him to its center. He felt as if an invisible force was leading him, pushing him towards a destiny that was about to unfold. Finally, he reached the central square, and his gaze fixed on a majestic structure rising in the middle of this gloomy place. In the very center of the square, on a stone altar, lay an enormous stone, etched with ancient and powerful symbols. On top of this stone, Leif saw something that instantly caught his attention: a crown. It was not just a crown, but a work of art of unearthly beauty, as if created by the hands of the gods themselves. It was cast from golden metal, emitting an ethereal glow, reflecting the meager light that penetrated through the dark clouds. The crown was adorned with precious stones that shimmered with a soft light, creating a play of colors as if dancing in the wind. Every detail was crafted with incredible care, with intricate lines and curves that formed symbols unfamiliar to Leif. Yet at the same time, they seemed painfully familiar, as if they were engraved in his ancestral memory. The presence of the crown captivated him in an inexplicable way. Leif felt an overwhelming sensation embrace him, as if something inside him was awakening. It was a deep feeling, coming from within, something that directly connected him to his lineage, to his Viking blood. He froze, gazing at the crown, and it seemed to him that a quiet but distinct voice resonated in his mind. It is yours. Wear it." There was no logical explanation, but Leif did not hesitate. The call was irresistible, as if it came from the very depths of his soul. With trembling fingers, Leif reached for the crown, and as soon as he touched it, a wave of energy surged through his body, as if the entire history of Jonvik and his own lineage entered his being. Without a second thought, he lifted it and placed it upon his head. The moment the crown touched his skin, something incredible happened. The city around him seemed to come alive. The shadows that had been watching him vanished, and his spirit was filled with a sense of strength and connection to ancient kings and Viking warriors. He was destined for something greater, something that transcended time and space. Leif understood that he had taken a decisive step on his journey. The weight of the crown on his head now felt like a part of his destiny, something he could no longer refuse. Feeling the weight of the crown on his head, Leif felt power surging within him. The city, which had once seemed gloomy and full of shadows, began to transform before his eyes. The air seemed to fill with warmth, and the ground beneath his feet vibrated with hidden energy. For a moment, Leif thought it was his imagination, but looking around, he realized that something extraordinary was happening. The once silent streets came alive, and the echo of an ancient celebration seemed to burst forth from the city's depths. Suddenly, the square erupted with jubilant shouts. The inhabitants, who had previously looked at him with suspicion and apprehension, now approached with shining eyes, full of recognition. Men, women, and children emerged from the shadows of houses and narrow alleys, converging from all corners of the city. They surrounded Leif, their faces glowing as if the burden of centuries of waiting had finally been lifted. A jubilant crowd formed around Leif, and the sounds of tambourines and drums filled the square, creating a pulsating rhythm as if marking the beat of an ancient ceremony. Cries of "Long live the king!" rang out, accompanied by chants and words that Leif did not entirely understand, but which he felt echoed in his soul. The citizens, appearing in all their splendor, were not just ordinary people. They were warriors and healers, bound by a common glorious past, an ancient heritage awaiting its awakening. Gazing at Leif's crown, they saw in him not merely a man, but the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy about the return of the Shadow King, the one who would bring prosperity and strength for Jonvik's rebirth. Soon the townspeople began to dance around him, a dance full of power and grace, as if fate itself danced in their veins. Women in colorful dresses twirled to the music, men raised their fists to the sky, and even children ran around Leif, cheering and laughing. The golden glow emanating from the crown merged with the flames of the torches illuminating the square, creating a magical atmosphere, as if the gods themselves were smiling at that moment. Leif was swept away by a whirlwind of emotions. He could never have imagined that his journey would lead him here, where he would be celebrated as a king, and a king foretold by prophecy at that. But in that moment, he realized that his connection to these people, to this land, was far deeper than he could have imagined. It seemed his soul was linked to Jonvik, as if he were the key to a new cycle of life and prosperity. With a faint smile, Leif raised his hands, allowing the city, its inhabitants, and fate to completely consume him. The future of Jonvik was now in his hands, and he felt that his journey had only just begun. In the first days after Leif's coronation, the city of Jonvik resembled a fairy tale land more than a kingdom. He walked the streets with a heavy crown on his head, observing the changes unfolding around him. Time itself seemed to slow, allowing him to absorb every detail of his new reality. The majestic city, with its rock-carved buildings, flower-filled gardens, and imposing walls, seemed to have been created especially for him, as if destined for the return of its rightful heir. But what struck Leif most was not the city's splendor, but the immediate connection he felt with its inhabitants. With each passing day, Leif grew closer to the people of Jonvik. He observed their daily lives, learning about their customs, traditions, and the challenges they faced. The women, strong and resilient, maintained the prosperity of the city market, always finding a wise word or a story of Jonvik's glorious past. The men, brave and loyal, worked in the forges, crafting swords and shields for battles to come. Even the children, with their boundless energy, seemed to understand the importance of their role, running and playing in the squares, but always looking hopefully towards the future of their kingdom. Leif, though still learning, already understood that his role as king was not only about governance, but also about understanding the hearts of his subjects and the secrets they held. He was amazed that, despite his newfound status, everyone treated him with deep respect, as if they already knew he was the leader the city had been waiting for. Everyone he met on the streets respectfully bowed or greeted him with reverence. He began to comprehend the elders' tales of prophecies, and the weight of those words was now clear in his mind. He was the king foretold by prophecy, the one who would bring prosperity to the city, and also the guardian of ancient traditions, of epic battles that occurred before his arrival. Leif often felt as if he were guided by forces beyond his control, as if fate itself had chosen him. In the throne room, Leif spent long hours with his advisors, listening to tales of neighboring lands, of villages attacked by bandits, and of past heroes who defended the kingdom. He also met with the great warriors of Jonvik, whose swords had been passed down through generations, always with the purpose of protecting their people. The teachings he received were profound, and he accepted them with humility. Leif understood that his reign would not be solely about peaceful governance. He had to be a strong leader, capable of facing the challenges and enemies that awaited him. Every morning, Leif greeted the dawn with a clear understanding of his mission. As soon as he awoke, he headed to the fortress walls, from which he could see the majestic mountains, like ancient guardians protecting the city. Returning to the palace, he began discussions on pressing matters with his advisors. The king also dedicated time to training with the warriors, striving to master all the subtleties of military art. He understood that his role was not limited to sitting on the throne. He would have to lead the army in battles, on whose outcome the fate of the kingdom depended. With each meeting and training session, the burden of power felt stronger. Soon, Leif began implementing important reforms. He improved the trade system, ensuring access to resources for nearby villages, and renewed alliances with once-forgotten Viking clans. His wise decisions earned him the love of his people, and his main goal remained the revival of Jonvik's former prosperity. However, despite his successes, a vague premonition of trouble never left Leif. His advisors spoke of safety and well-being, but the king's heart sensed approaching danger. One night, while walking through the palace corridors, he discovered a mysterious letter sealed with an unfamiliar iron stamp depicting a Viking with an axe and a torch, an ominous symbol of impending war. Breaking the seal, Leif read the message, which sent shivers down his spine. It spoke of an approaching army of barbarian Vikings led by a certain Tin, hungry for riches, land, and the destruction of the lost kingdom. Leif, now king, had only one path left: to stand in defense of his people. He understood that the battle would not be easy. The next morning, Leif summoned his advisors and warriors. His words were stern but full of resolve. "Our kingdom, our home, is threatened. The barbarian army is close, and we must not allow a surprise attack. Jonvik has a great destiny, and we will not allow it to be defiled by unclean hands." The burden of responsibility pressed upon him like a stone slab. He had to act immediately, gather an army, and defend his land. Looking at the horizon, Leif felt an anxious premonition. He understood that the coming war was just the beginning of something much bigger. The cold wind brought with it a sense of urgency. Leif did not know what awaited him in the future, but he was sure of one thing. The history of Jonvik, his lost kingdom, was only just beginning. With the weight of the crown and the responsibility for his people, he had to fight to preserve peace and prosperity, unraveling mysteries and overcoming the trials fate had prepared for him. The battle for Jonvik was imminent, but who would prove to be the true enemy? Could Leif protect his people, or would his reign turn into a desperate struggle for the kingdom's survival? The end of one era was approaching and the beginning of another. Jonvik's fate rested in the hands of one man, but was he ready for the trials that awaited him?